We'll probably finish up the chapter, Lord willing, tonight, and then we'll have one chapter left. I'm going to start at verse 1, just read through, and then just to get the context, we pick it up at verse 10. It said, Then Naomi, her mother-in-law, said unto her, My daughter, shall I not seek rest for thee, that it may be well with thee? She's concerned about finding a husband for her, and so she's not out there having to glean the fields. It says, And now is not Boaz of our kindred, with whose maidens thou wast? Behold, he went with barley tonight in the threshing floor. So he's already showed her some kindness, so now Naomi's taking the next step, and he says, Now this is what you got to do. And she tells her in verse 3, Wash thyself therefore, and anoint thee, and put thy raiment upon thee, and get thee down to the floor. That's the threshing floor. But make not thyself known unto the man until he shall have done eating and drinking. In other words, he's done all his business. He's had a good meal, because he's going to be hungry after he gets all that work that they do, winnowing and everything. He'll be hungry. Let him get a good meal in him. And then it says, And it shall be, when he lieth down, thou shalt mark the place where he shall lie. We didn't have street lights in those days. No lit up. It's not lit up. It's pitch dark in there at night. And thou shalt go in and uncover his feet, and lay thee down, and he will tell thee what thou shalt do. Now, we looked at the verses in the Old Testament, what that's about, and it had to do with, she was giving him a gentle reminder that he is the kinsman redeemer. And there's uncovering that shoe was him agreeing to take her when he takes a shoe off his foot. And it's how they made a deal. And it had something to do with the soles of their feet walking on the land that God promised them. So that shoe represented that you were giving up that land. And she went down into the floor and did according to all that her mother-in-law bade her. And when Boaz had eaten and drunk and his heart was merry, he went to lie down at the end of the heap of corn. And she came softly and uncovered his feet and laid her down. So he was so tired he passed out. He didn't even know that she was there and uncovered his feet. Now some are saying maybe there was a blanket over his feet, She uncovered his feet, whether it took off his shoes or, I don't know. I think she took his shoes off, is what I think. And it came to pass at midnight. What? Oh. Everybody got a better idea? Anyway, it came to pass at midnight that the man was afraid and turned himself, and behold, a woman lay at his feet. And, something in the pitch dark, and there's something laying on your feet or laying at your feet. That'd scare anybody. And he said, Who art thou? And she answered, I am Ruth, thine handmaid. Spread therefore thy skirt over thine handmaid, for thou art a near kinsman. And by her saying that, thou art a near kinsman, I mean, he knows exactly why she's there. And he knows what his responsibility is according to the law. So when he says when she says, Spread therefore thy skirt over thine handmaid, I don't know what the Baptist brethren do with that passage, is that men wore skirts back in those days. They were just full wearing gowns or whatever that they wore. I don't know how to explain it, but it was a skirt, and it was long. And it said that Jesus was the description of him, he's clothed to the foot. And these things were big enough. I mean, you could have thrown it like a blanket over somebody. It was so big. And so the men were actually wearing women's clothes in biblical days. I mean, if you want to just take it that far. Actually, there was a difference in the garments, but not so much a difference that they weren't like the same style. There may be a difference in, I'm trying to think of like the Chinese garments that they wear, what do they call them things? Huh? No? They're like pajamas, There may be a difference in the men's versus the women's. I mean, I can't tell the difference, but there may be. I'm talking about the ones that live out in the villages and stuff, that common clothing that they wear. The common clothing that they wore in Vietnam. You couldn't tell a man from a woman. They were wearing the same clothing. I don't think that's so much the issue is is trying to be like a man or to be effeminate and be like a woman. I think it's more that. Anyway, I'm not going to get into that, which I just did, but I'm not going to get into it further. All right, verse 10, he said, this is what, I'm telling you, I can't remember anybody's name right now. Huh? Boaz. He said, this is what Boaz says to her. He said, blessed be thou of the Lord, my daughter, for thou hast showed more kindness in the latter end than at the beginning, inasmuch as thou followest not young men, whether poor or rich. So he's still remembering what Ruth did in going with Naomi. I mean, she could have abandoned Naomi for her own people, like Orpah did. Ruth could have abandoned the God that she was introduced to through Naomi and her family, and she didn't do that. She says, your God's going to be my God. Where you live, I'm going to live. Where you die, I'm going to die. And he hasn't forgotten that. And Ruth could have also sought out a younger man or a wealthier man than Boaz. She does have something to offer, not just herself, but she has the land that belongs to the family. This is the whole point of it. The whole point of it is that the land not be lost because there's no heir by a man, and they like it to stay within the tribe. That's the reason why you're looking for the near kinsman, so that the inheritance stays within the tribe and stays within the family. That's the whole point of all this. And she could have sought out a younger man. I don't know, he must be a little bit older, or a wealthier man. Because, I mean, she does have something to offer. She has all this land that they're going to be owners of. But instead, she followed the law. She followed Naomi's advice. All she cares about is doing the right thing. Because here's what he says. The next thing he says proves this. In verse 11, he says, now, my daughter, fear not. I will do to thee all that thou requirest, for all the city of my people doth know that thou art a virtuous woman. The word virtue means moral excellence. Someone with moral excellence, always doing what is right, good and honorable. That's virtue. This is a Gentile, cursed Moabite, qualifying as a virtuous woman. And that is no small thing. That is no small thing. I got a verse here, Proverbs 31:30. Of course, it's all about a virtuous woman. Proverbs 31:30 says, favor is deceitful and beauty is vain, but a woman that feareth the Lord, she shall be praised. And this woman fears the Lord. When she tells Naomi, she says, if this is what I got to do, if this is the law, I'll do exactly what you tell me to do, and she does it. She just trusts God, and she fears God, and she does it, and she's praised for it. You talk about the word virtuous, you get the word virtue. Well, women aren't the only ones to have virtue. Men are to have virtue. In fact, it's the very first thing you're to add to your faith. In 2 Peter chapter 1, if you want to turn there, 2 Peter chapter 1, starting in verse 3, when you get saved, it really doesn't matter what pit God pulled you out of, what miry clay he pulled your boots and all out of. It's when he gets you up out of the ditch and it gets you up out of the pit, what you do with it after that. And, maybe you ain't got the morals of a dog. Well, add them. Maybe you don't have any couth about you. Well, add some. Maybe you don't have any culture. Maybe you need a little bit. Maybe you can't not sit down and know how to eat with a knife and fork. Learn. There's nothing wrong with moral excellence. There's nothing wrong with being honorable. There's nothing wrong with just doing right. And some people they're just satisfied with what they are and who they are. Well, why? I've never been satisfied a day in my life the way I am. Why would you be satisfied with what you are and how you are right now? You've arrived? Is there a fourth person in the Trinity here? Please raise your hand. If not, there's always something to work on and add to. But it says here in verse 3, according as his divine power hath given unto us all things that pertain unto life and godliness, through the knowledge of him that hath called us to glory and virtue, whereby are given to us exceeding great and precious promises, that by these ye might be partakers of the divine nature, having escaped the corruption that is in the world through lust. And beside this, giving all diligence, that means you need to take care of this. Giving all diligence, add your faith, virtue. Once you've believed on Christ, guess what? Now you need some morals. You need a moral compass. You need to know what's right and wrong. You need to know what's polite and impolite in society. There's nothing wrong with knowing those things. So he says, add your faith, virtue, and to virtue, knowledge. And to knowledge, temperance, and temperance, patience, to patience, godliness, godliness, brotherly kindness, charity. For if these things be in you and abound, they make you that ye shall neither be barren nor unfruitful in the knowledge of our Lord Jesus Christ. But man, the thing starts with adding virtue. So a virtuous woman whose price is far above rubies, more rare than one of 1,000 that can be found among men, but not one of 1,000 can be found among women. Yet Ruth is the only woman in the Bible that's called virtuous. I looked. There is not another in the entire Bible. It talks about a virtuous woman. You can't find another one that says this was a virtuous woman. The only one that's said to be a virtuous woman is Ruth, and Ruth is the type of the bride of Christ. There's only 2 people in the Bible that were said to have great faith, and both of them were Gentiles, and one of them was a Canaanite. Which kind of tells you that even if you're a cursed people or from a cursed race, that doesn't matter what you turn out to be. See, I think that Ruth has a transformation, just like we're to have a transformation. We're to be transformed by the renewing of our mind, by adding those things to our faith that changes us. Listen, this is for testimony. This is to please God. Nobody's going to believe you if you're going to act the way you've always acted. That thing there says, behold, a woman of Canaan came out of the same coast and cried unto him. Of course, she's crying to him to have mercy on her daughter, that she's grievously vexed with the devil. And the Lord even insults her, calls her a dog. Is it meet to take the children's bread and cast it to dogs? And she's the dog. I mean, most people wouldn't have took that. She not only took it, she came back and said, well, even the dogs eat of the crumbs that fall from the master's table. And man, he just looked at her and said, woman, great is thy faith. I mean, she stuck with the stuff. She said, well, you're going to throw a little scripture at me. I got a verse or 2 I can remember about treating your animal right. He said, if I'm an animal, well, at least you're supposed to throw me some crumbs. She got her prayer answered. You got to know how to deal with God. This woman knew how to. That's why he says, great is thy faith. She knew how to deal with him. You know, after a while, you're reading your Bible, you kind of know how to pray. You kind of know how to address God, deal with God. I'm not saying there's an art to it, but I'm saying there's a way to it. You know how I know that? You learn when you live with somebody. When you're married to somebody, you learn how to deal with them. Okay? Now, you may learn how to punch their buttons too, but I'm just saying you learn how to deal with them. You learn how to, you know what buttons not to push too. Anyway, he said, "O woman, great is thy faith." The other was a centurion, a Roman. And he said, he's not seen so great faith, no, not in Israel, when he was talking about that man. But you notice it wasn't 2 Jews. A virtuous woman, it wasn't a Jew. It was a cursed Moabite, half-breed. That tells you something right there. You could take the sorriest people on earth and save them, and they can be the greatest of faith and virtue. That's what God can make out of anybody. So he meets, she sneaks in there on the floor, the threshing floor. And Ruth is not there to fornicate with Boaz on the threshing floor. She is there to remind him kindly and privately of his duty as a kinsman redeemer. Boaz, however, could have taken her right then and there, and it would have been legal. He could have, because he's the kinsman redeemer. She's there to remind him that he's the kinsman redeemer. You say, what constitutes a marriage? Flesh joining flesh constitutes a marriage. They could have been married right then and there. Would it have been scandalous? Yes. That's why it didn't happen. Because two people had virtue, not just one. Virtue happens to be one of his chief features. And I'll get to some things about that in just a second. There's something interesting about virtue, and I don't quite understand it, but we find these verses, Mark chapter 5, verse 30. It said, "And Jesus, immediately knowing in himself that virtue had gone out of him, turned him about in the press and said, 'Who touched my clothes?' Luke 6:19, "And the whole multitude sought to touch him, for there went virtue out of him and healed them all." Luke 8:46, "And Jesus said, 'Somebody hath touched me, for I perceive that virtue is gone out of me.'" You see, these verses imply that with virtue comes power, the power to heal. And it may be that, I'm just talking about as a prophetical thing, not talking about her being a virtuous woman, but it may be that this virtue has something to do with the 144,000 in the tribulation. I believe there's a verse that says, "Confess your faults one to another, pray for one another that you may be healed. The effectual, fervent prayer of a righteous man availeth much." Yeah, that's in James 5:16. So it may be that with this moral excellence, with this virtue, there is the power to heal in the tribulation, possibly the 144,000. I'm almost sure that he says, "These signs shall follow them which believe." And you can start going over reading them signs, man. It's like, who's he talking about? Because he has not talked about you and I. Why? Signs are to the Jew. Well, who's the one showing the signs and wonders? It's that 144,000 that are going to show up. And one of those things will deal with healing. They'll be able to speak in tongues. I believe they'll be able to be transported to wherever they need to be. They'll be able to multiply bread. A lot of the things you're seeing in those, the signs and wonders that Jesus Christ is showing, is something that's going to show up in the tribulation, and those 144,000 are going to, it says they will do exploits. Those are incredible things, if you will. Yeah. All right, verse 12. And he says to her, he says, "And now it is true that I am thy near kinsman. Howbeit, there is a kinsman nearer than I. Tarry this night, and it shall be in the morning, that if he will perform unto thee the part of a kinsman, well, let him do the kinsman part. But if he will not do the part of a kinsman to thee, then will I do the part of a kinsman to thee. As the Lord liveth, lie down until the morning." So a near kinsman is going to be revealed in the next chapter. We're going to deal with that then, rather than talk about it right now. But Boaz then swears with an oath that if the near kinsman cannot perform the part of a kinsman redeemer, then he will. Hebrews 6:16-18 says, "For men verily swear by the greater. An oath for confirmation is to them an end of all strife, wherein God, willing more abundantly to show unto the heirs of promise the immutability of his counsel, confirmed it by an oath." See, the same picture is true with us. God has promised by an oath. He has promised us salvation. He can't swear by no greater but by himself. So Boaz gives her a promise. He said, now, if that other near kinsman won't redeem you, he goes, "As the Lord liveth," that's swearing by God. He said, "I will." And he told her, just lie down till the morning. And then in verse 14, "And she lay at his feet until the morning, and she rose up before one could know another." I mean, it's still, if there was a moon, I don't know, it doesn't sound like there might not have been a moon going on about them, because, they couldn't he didn't know somebody's at his feet. So if there's no moon, man, I'm telling you, it's pitch dark. If you're out in the country, there's no city lights. And he said, let it not be known that a woman came into the floor. And he said, bring the veil that thou hast upon thee and hold it. And when he had held it, he measured 6 measures of barley and laid it on her, and she went into the city. That expression, laid it on her. Lay it on me, man. Lay it on me. Okay, that's where we get the expression. It came right there. Anyway. But it said he lay at his feet till morning. Nothing happened between them. If it did, it would have been an instant marriage between them. But the fallout of this situation and timing would have been a scandal. That's just all there is to it. Matthew 19:5 said, and for this cause shall a man leave father and mother, shall cleave to his wife, and they twain shall be one flesh. So a bond of marriage, I didn't say an actual cleaving of itself, but the bond of marriage is flesh joining flesh. Most Christians don't have that understanding. They think it's a piece of paper. It's not a piece of paper. It's flesh joining flesh. And if a man is married and then he has a relationship with another woman, that's adultery. Because now it's flesh leaving flesh and establishing another bond. And that's why it's given as a reason for divorce. Adultery is one of the reasons why you could have a scriptural divorce, is because adultery breaks that physical bond because he's established another one. So he says to her, let it not be known. This is where Boaz demonstrates his own virtue. Why? He's concerned over the very appearance of evil. Listen, if he would have taken her that night, he had every legal right to do so. But he also knows that it would have created a scandal. Why? There would have been talk. Remember, this is not about evil. This is about the appearance of evil. It's about people saying, well, I saw him going in there, you know. It's like going into a bar to preach. I don't recommend it. You might go in there and they might throw you out, but it looks like they're throwing you out for the wrong reason. See what I mean? Somebody driving by and they say you throwing you out of a bar. You're in there just to preaching the gospel with all your little heart. But they threw him out of the bar. He's all drunk and disorderly, and they throw him out. I saw it, man. I saw it with my own eyes. I got video. You know? What? An appearance of evil. 1 Thessalonians 5:22, abstain from all appearance of evil, right? So what would be an appearance of evil? Well, they could say Ruth trapped him and seduced him on the threshing floor, couldn't they? Couldn't they? Why in the world is Ruth going to him in the dead of night at the threshing floor? Boaz took advantage and forced her when he found her. Could they not say that? There's a reason why we have wedding services and receptions and all that good, all kinds of witnesses. Because it's two parties that agree. And there's nothing going on that shouldn't be going on. The other thing was that Boaz, if he would have taken her, would have brushed off the fact by taking her first, or by taking first what was the choice of the nearer kinsman. That could have been scandalous. The nearer kinsman could have said, well, hey, what's going on here? I'm nearer kinsman than you are. Why did you take her? So then the thing about 6 measures of barley, where he says to her, bring the veil that thou hast upon thee and hold it. And when he had held it, he measured 6 measures of barley and laid it on her, and she went into the city. And I'm like, what's that all about? Well, she didn't want to go back to her mother. He says he didn't want her to go back to her mother-in-law empty, but there's something else to this. This is the earnest of his word that he will redeem all. He's letting Naomi know by that 6 measures of meal, which she couldn't have got that much in a week, I don't know, but by giving her that 6 measures of meal, and by the way, that must have been finished meal. I don't know if it was ground, but it was finished as far as the threshing and all that. He was letting her know, here's the down payment. I'm going to come through with it. Just as we get an earnest to our salvation, 2 Corinthians 1:22 says, who hath also sealed us and given the earnest of the Spirit in our hearts. That's the down payment. Now, we're still waiting on the body, and that's going to come along here before long. But right now, the inside gets, there's been a makeover on the inside. We haven't had the makeover on the outside. In 2 Corinthians 5:5, it says, now he that hath wrought us for the selfsame thing is God, who also hath given unto us the earnest of the Spirit. This is spoken about over and over again. That's what you got to explain to a new convert. Now, you're saved. You're a new creature on the inside. But God hasn't saved that outside yet. Ephesians 1:14 says, which is the earnest of our inheritance until the redemption of the purchased possession unto the praise of his glory. That's when you get the new body. So right now we just get a down payment. You've gotten your 6 measures of barley. And I'm going to make an application to that. So let's read verse 16 through 18, then I'll finish this up. I'll be made and get done early. And when she came to her mother-in-law, she said, who art thou, my daughter? And she told her all that the man had done to her. And she said, these 6 measures of barley gave he me, for he said to me, go not empty unto thy mother-in-law. Then said she, sit still, my daughter, until thou know how the matter will fall, for the man will not be in rest until we have finished the thing this day. Now, when she came to her mother-in-law, and she said, who art thou, my daughter? It's not that she's fallen into senility and doesn't recognize this half-breed Moabite standing. She knows exactly. She wants to know, are you Mrs. Boaz or not? Naomi doesn't know the situation. He could have publicly announced her at the party or something, or brought her out before all the people and, had an instant marriage, which would have been very uncommon, I think. But anyway, I think Naomi's like, we just gotta make sure that happens. Maybe she's anxious for it to happen. But he says, who art thou, my daughter? And she told her all that the man had done. He said, well, he gave me this. She said, I got 6 measures of meal here. I don't have that ring on my finger. I think what you know how Naomi interpreted it? She showed her those 6, measures? Okay, 6 measures of barley or whatever meal. She shows it to her and she goes, oh, you're engaged. That's exactly what she believes now. So it's like putting a ring on her finger, or a promise or a down payment. He's saying he's going to do. If the other one won't do it, he's going to do it. And that barley was a token of that, I guess. 6 measures. There's something that shows up a few times in the Bible, quite a few times actually, where there's 6 of something. And man's history is going to run 6,000 years. The 7,000, the Messiah will be here ruling and reigning. Till then, you have 6,000 years of human history of man just wallowing in his own sin. And that 6 measures could picture that 6,000 years. You have 6 water pots of stone in John chapter 2. And the picture of that thing is blood, wine. It's turned into wine. And those 6 water pots picture 6,000 years that the blood covers. And now it's going to cover beyond that, but I'm talking about as far as man's history. He said, 6 days shalt thou labor, in Exodus 20, verse 9, where you have a week where a man works, and then the 7th day there's rest, picturing 6th and then the 7th. You have 6 branches that come out of the side of the golden candlestick in Exodus 25:32 and 37:18. And that is, you have one that's straight up and down. That's part of the candlestick itself, and then you have 6 branches. picturing those 6,000 years. You have 6 covered wagons that's delivered by the princes for the service of the tabernacle in Numbers chapter 7, verse 3. You have 6 years that a Hebrew bondservant must serve before he's released in the 7th year. And all this picture is being in bondage under sin for 6,000 years, and then, peace, rest, deliverance. And remember, a lot of this is in relation to Israel. There are, in 2 Samuel 6:13, every 6 paces, David sacrificed oxen and fatlings when the ark bearers had gone those 6 paces. And there's a few more, and some of them I would have a little bit tougher time applying, but I'm sure that's not all of them, but it kind of shows up over and over. And the Bible wants you to understand, look, there are 6,000 years of human history, and then there's the millennial reign of Christ, which is the rest. I mean, God in 6 days created it and rested the 7th. He wants you to get that. That's one of the most primary, basic, and first things that you would learn in the Bible. Why? Because it's dependent on you understanding how long this thing runs. So what she says to Ruth in verse 18, then said she, sit still, my daughter, until thou know how the matter will fall, for the man will not be in rest until we have finished the thing this day. That's basically what God's kind of telling us. Just sit still. Psalm 4:4 says, stand in awe, and I do, and sin not. I wish I didn't sin so much. Commune with your own heart upon your bed and be still. In other words, man, you ought to be talking to God. You ought to be in the Word, but you can be still. You shouldn't be panicked. We shouldn't be panicked, but we should be very much aware that things are in flux. And in Psalm 46:10, he says, be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the heathen. I will be exalted in the earth. And that is, you can be assured of one thing, the Lord is coming back. And the Lord will be exalted among the heathen. He will be exalted in the earth because he will be here. And you can bank on that. I mean, if you all been up on the news, man, World War III is really cooking right now. I mean, really. There's threats from, see, what's going to happen? Well, it really doesn't matter. I mean, it does affect my immediate situation. It might affect your immediate situation, but it doesn't affect your eternal situation, now does it? I've always said if there's a nuclear war, I can't tell a nuclear blast from the rapture anyway. I don't think I think either one I'd be satisfied with. I mean, it's like vaporized or caught up, I think they'll both be about as quick. Now, the one with the radiation poisoning, now that's not, I don't like that one. But yeah, well, I want to be ground zero, You want to be ground zero. You just want to be where you used to be. There's just a crater there. Everything's gone. That would suit me. That would suit me just fine. I mean, but anyway. He says, the man will not be at rest. He will not be in rest until we have finished the thing this day. And this is going to picture the first coming of Christ because he had some work to do. And listen, at this point, he tells her to be still. You know why? There is nothing she can do. And we tell the sinner, just be still. There's nothing you can do. The only thing you can do is believe on the kinsman redeemer that he's going to do what he said he was going to do. And that's exactly the thing here. John 4:34, Jesus saith unto them, my meat is to do the will of him that sent me and to finish his work. John 17:4, I have glorified thee on the earth. I have glorified thee on the earth. I have finished the work which thou gavest me to do. There's one passage where he says, the Father works and so do I. I mean, he had some work to do, work that you couldn't do. The only thing you can do is just stand back and watch it. That's all the disciples did, just stand back and watch it, because it was the only one that could do that work was him. He was the kinsman redeemer, and he is the only one that could have made it happen. John 19:30, when Jesus therefore received the vinegar, he said, "It is finished." And he bowed his head and gave up the ghost. He finished the work. One last verse. Turn to Romans chapter 7. Since this is about a man and a woman and about a marriage, and it's kind of interesting how this goes in Romans 7, verse 1 to 3. It says, "Know ye not, brethren, for I speak to them that know the law, how that the law hath dominion over a man as long as he liveth." Now, if you want to know who the near kinsman is right here in the context, the one that's nearer than Boaz. "For the woman which hath an husband is bound by the law to her husband so long as he liveth. But if the husband be dead, she is loosed from the law of her husband." Verse 3, "So then if while her husband liveth, she be married to another man, she shall be called an adulteress. But if her husband be dead, she is free from that law, so that she is no adulteress, though she be married to another man." So you have Ruth, who is married to a man, but he's dead, so the law says she's free to marry another, Boaz. But they got to go talk to the nearer kinsman and see, well, can you redeem her? We're going to find out that he can't. So she's free to marry another. Listen, the Bible says you're dead and your life is hid in Christ. You're dead. You're free to marry another. So guess what? You became married to Jesus Christ. You became bone of his bone and flesh of his flesh. That's why you're the bride, collectively. So that same picture is right there. She's free to marry another because her husband's dead. But they've got to get the consent that she is free to marry another. And that's why they got to go to this nearer kinsman. And once they get that straightened out, then Boaz can fulfill his promise, which he does. Jesus said if there could have been given a law which could have given life, or eternal life, he said then it would have been by the law. I'm kind of paraphrasing that. It would have been by the law. But the law can't do it. The law can't redeem. Okay. All right. Anybody got a question about what we covered tonight? We're done early. I usually bloviate for at least 15 more minutes. Okay.